Shabbat Shalom. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I am probably in the minority in this particular room on this particular day in saying that I grew up with video games. It's just a hunch that not everybody in the room had that same experience, but I'm sure that all of you are familiar now, at least through pop culture references, to that whole notion of video games, the computer games, those kinds of things. You know, the Nintendo those kids play. All right, so work with me here. If you are like me and you don't only enjoy games, but you especially like RPG, role-playing games, then you may be familiar with the history of how this works. But I want to talk about one sub-mechanic, one of the elements of these games that you may not have given as much thought to. Maybe it hasn't bothered you as much as it has me. And that is the issue of inventory management. Inventory management. See, in the old games, like the early Zeldas and all of that, you would run around and you'd have your little stick sticking out in front of you, your weapon, and you would eventually kill something that would give you the better weapon, and then, boom, now you've got the fancy sword sticking out in front of your character when you run and attack the other monsters. You're all with me so far. You had the old stick, you drop the stick, you get the sword, everything's good. The sword is immeasurably better. And there was no way to keep a hold of the old stick. Aha, says the video game world, but let's move this along a little bit. And as the games got slightly more complex, well, you began to have an inventory. You began to have at least a hypothetical backpack that you could fill with, well, everything. And so after you got the new sword, you'd put the old stick in the backpack. Now, the ideal, of course, was that eventually you would go to the merchant, and then you would sell off all of that old stuff. But many of us become hoarders in games like this, where we don't want to sell off the stick, because what if I need the stick for something later? How do I know this stick wouldn't be important? And the merchant's only going to give me one copper piece for it anyway. I don't need the money, so I'll just hold on to it, along with dozens of potions, and along with all the other suits of armor that I've collected, essentially creating what would be thousands and thousands of pounds of weight on the back of this tiny little character running around the screen. And this is something that's always frustrated me, because, like I said, on the one hand, it is very annoying to keep picking things up and adding them to this ever-growing, vast menagerie of items. But equally problematic is the solution that many game developers have put in place, called encumbrance. If you are carrying too much, your character is going to start moving more slowly. This is their attempt to try and get this out of your system. They try doing caps, where you just could only carry so many items and then you maxed out, but they found that people would just max it out and then continue to try and juggle things, and so they decided to put an encumbrance limit on this. If you're carrying 5,000 pounds of items, you're going to move a little bit more slowly than if you weren't carrying 5,000 pounds of items. So now, hoarders like me are constantly having to go to the merchant and sell the items, or decide, do I not pick it up in the first, but what if it's important? I think I have to pick it up. It creates a great deal of psychological trauma for people like me when playing what should otherwise be a fun game. But in fact, it has a very real spiritual benefit. I don't mean the fact that playing games has spiritual benefits. They certainly do. Games in general are one of the wonderful aspects of being a human being, whether they be a video game, whether they be a sports game, whether they be card games, whatever type of game you enjoy. It is essential that the human mind play with different ideas and different ways of being, rather than just always doing the practical thing. It is impractical to always be practical, in fact. But the solution that they have come up with, this encumbrance limit, is also a very important insight into this time of Teshuvah. You see, we pick up so much during each year. We pick up the good and we pick up the bad, often self-generated. We have the good memories that we are holding on to, and we also have the bad memories that we are holding on to, the regrets, the embarrassment, the anger. And really, we all have an encumbrance limit. We all have a certain carrying capacity for our spiritual and psychological burdens. Now, that means you have an option. You come to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you are burdened down with the weight of everything that has happened during this last year. You can hold on to it, continue to hoard all of that, but that means in the year to come, you're not going to have any empty slots to add anything to your carrying capacity. Now you might be thinking, well, that's good. Then that means I can't do anything bad. Any bad things that happen are just going to stay on the ground because I have nowhere to stick them in my mental capacity. But you see, we unfortunately, thanks to our game design, share the slots between the good and the bad within us. Which means if you have no more slots, you also have no more capacity to absorb the good that is coming in. We have to make room for new good things. You have an option. You can get rid of the very lightweight and buoying elements that are already good in our life, the happy memories, the good times, the feelings of pride and satisfaction from when we have done what was right. Or we can drop the leaden weights of our mistakes. Or we can drop those. Too often, though, we drop the good stuff. And we dwell, we pack ourselves solid with all of the memories of our bad things, of harms done to us and the harms we have done to others, of our regrets, of our anger, of our shame or our embarrassment. We watch them over and over again in the movie theater of our mind. We hoard them as though somehow we are defined by them. Somehow we are made more solid because of these heavy burdens that we continue to carry. We even praise ourselves for the strength that we can muscle on despite all of these things. Just drop them. I promise you don't need them. Let go of them. Allow yourself to truly feel your full strength when you're not burdened by them. You will feel even stronger when you have laid them down, just as when you have done exercise and you put down the weights, your arms suddenly feel like they are floating. That can happen for the entirety of yourself, for your being. Let go of the bad to make room for the good. Hold on to the good to strengthen you and buoy you as you go forward. It's not complicated. It's not easy, but it's also not complicated. Let go of the harm that you have done or that has been done to you. Ask for forgiveness for those that you have harmed. Forgive yourself for the mistakes that you have made that may have harmed no one but you. And give forgiveness freely to those that may have done you wrong in this past year. There is no point to carry these things forward. There is no merchant waiting at the next village that you'll sell them to. There is no quest that you're going to need all of these leadened weights in order to fulfill. They do nothing except burden you down. Let go of them through the power of the Shuva, of the acts of repentance. Not only the intention, the acts of repentance. Allow them to be left behind. Hopefully you've already begun the process. That's much of what the month of Elul was for, and Rosh Hashanah. But if you have not yet completed the process, then please, today, tomorrow, as we move into Yom Kippur, finally, be rid of them. Let yourself fly into the new year without that weight that you are still carrying. It's up to you to manage the inventory. Shabbat Shalom and Gemar Chatima Tova.